But my section today is going to be different. One, I apologize for the fact that I'm kind of a chaos gremlin today. I need more energy, and that's just what it is. Here we are. But for this series and my section today is going to be less like history because a lot of us know what's happening. And I'm still going to give some contextual information, and especially like in the retroactive piece of my section. So, like, if you do go to our blog, please do, because there's going to be a lot of resources there, as well as just like articles and general additional contextual information for like why we're even having these conversations, and a lot of it's going to unpack that further. For this section of my series, a big piece of what I wanted to talk about was essentially just a resource share, calls to action, other methods of rallying our ghouls to protect the many things that are actively under attack right now, including but not limited to safe access to medical services, abortion, gender affirming care, and contraceptive access, among lots of other things. As many listeners probably know, there are active threats against Roe v. Wade. Many states have been passing laws that make abortion, as well as just safe medical care and access for women, LGBTQIA youth and adults, inaccessible. With all the awful going on, we figured it'd be a better use of our time and yours to provide people with next steps for their frustration and rage. With this, we also open our platform to others. So if you know of any resources, rallies, petitions, etc., that I haven't covered here, that you think our listeners should have access to, or want them to want to like use us as an amplifying voice for, put them in our comments, post them through email, tag us in things, and we'll share them out after vetting them, of course. But the main focus for this is outlining, because one of the major themes of this movie was abortion and abortion access. We'll be outlining access to abortion and the things that you can do to either support others or yourself in finding resources, fighting for rights, among other things. So I got a list specifically for if you're in need of abortion, steps that you can take in finding the resources you need. And a lot of these resources came from the National Network for Abortion Funds, because they provide like this very easy to get through list, access guides, steps that people can take for if you're in need of an abortion or you know someone who is, so that you can kind of point them in the right direction. This website also has an extensive list of funding for like organizations that fund safe abortions for people who need them, as well as travel expenses, legal advice, etc. So highly recommend checking it out. It's the National Network of Abortion Funds. You can find links to them from most of the Google searches that I did, as well as Planned Parenthood's website, I believe. So even if you don't get it from us or you can't find it in your Google search, you should be able to. But if you can't, it's accessible for many platforms. So if you are in need of abortion, these are the steps that they list on their website. One, it is to find out if you have insurance that covers your abortion, call your insurance company to ask if abortion is covered as a benefit, and ask for an in-network clinic so that you're not being charged for fees or the services that may not be covered under certain clinics. You can often find their phone number on the back of your insurance card, but if you have Medicaid, apparently it's very important to find out if your state specifically covers abortion, because it depends. Medicaid is impacted by your state's laws. So your Medicaid, if you're in a state that severely limits and outlaws abortion, it may be impacted by what it is able to cover. 2, make an appointment at a clinic for your abortion before searching for funding. Call different clinics to find out which one costs the least. Tell the clinic if you can't afford any of the things, and ask if there are discounts. And it's fine to make an appointment for an abortion, even if you're not sure how you'll pay for it, because there are services available and retroactive ways to pay for these things. Clinics don't charge you for rescheduling, which is really good. On their website, they do list a listing of like how to find a clinic in terms of like lists of clinics based on state and area. And I believe Planned Parenthood also does this. Basically add up how much you can cover on your own. Abortion funds often don't have to have the money to cover the entire cost of your abortion. So any money you can contribute to this will be important, as well as rallying, friends, family that you trust with this information to support you. Use their search box and map to find abortion funds that can help cover expenses to maximize your funding sources. You search by state where your clinic appointment is, as well as your home state. And if they're not the same, click list all national in the search function. Read the instructions before you contact an abortion fund. On the list, you'll find out if you qualify for funding and learn the best way to contact them by doing this. And contact lots of places. There are many places available, but there may be more than one local or national abortion fund that can help you with your abortion or other things you need on the way of getting an abortion, such as transportation, childcare, etc. But you can find out what to expect when you call from their listing. One thing that I found out in doing this research, which does not shock me at all, but was it just is ridiculous that this is a thing that happens. And I think I knew already, but like reading about it was like re-enraging. That there are clinics that intentionally exist to act as a barrier and don't give out any abortions at all, but instead are targeting ads for people who are genuinely searching for services and care as a means to mislead them, prolong the process, and ultimately push them outside of the legal range for safe abortion care within their states.
That is so extra.
Yeah. And it's actually something I found out through my job is that you can target ads in a very specific way. And I mean, the laws around this have changed a little bit with privacy restrictions. Specifically, I know on Facebook, the way they target ads has changed a lot because of like legal implications. But in Google searches, they can push their ads to the top, and they can be fake abortion clinics or crisis pregnancy centers, as they're called on the website, that'll be listed in phone books as abortion alternatives, and they'll show up in your internet searches and often offer you free pregnancy tests and free ultrasounds. But the people who perform these services are not doctors, and these places do not have to abide by HIPAA regulations. So you are not protected because they are not real medical practitioners. They are not real doctors. And by giving your medical information to them, you, one, put yourself at legal risk if they are to turn your information over to authorities, but you're also guaranteed almost to get medically inaccurate information because these people are not doctors.
That is horrifying.
Yes. And something else that I saw on their website is that there's places that are well-funded who will advertise themselves as crisis pregnancy centers, with the implication that they offer abortion services or even just like contraceptive services and care that don't have that intention and genuinely do just act as a barrier to keep someone long enough so that they pass the window of opportunity. So that's really stressful. And there's a list on their website as well as like how to identify these, how to find the right clinic. There's information on that same website that does kind of go through this, but all of them kind of sum through as just, it is an exhausting process, but you really have to do your research in doing this, seek the help of people you trust. And yeah, just like kind of rally your community if you have one. As well as just like be very mindful of your web browsers and things like that with the potential of Roe v. Wade being turned over and states like Oklahoma banning abortion outright. Like I believe their governor has signed that into law. So there are states that are making it impossible statewide to get an abortion, even if you are still protected federally. So essentially there are lots of states that are considered very high risk for people who need to like travel long distances, like state by state, like you have to travel multiple states to get to a state where abortion is legal, that exists specifically, mostly in the South, but not exclusively. Pennsylvania is considered kind of, that's where we live. And there are actually some laws that do exist that are pretty restrictive on abortion access here.
It is still legal.
It is still legal
in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's just there are laws that are restrictive of it. So it's not like openly, like there are people who will try to mislead you and get you to not meet the window of opportunity. And there's a map on the Planned Parenthood website as well as other websites that kind of give you state by state what those laws look like. But another thing that people should know about, that is something I did not know about until I saw a meme about it on Facebook and then decided to do more research on it, is the many ways that our data is tracked, and how if services become illegal, and like that one lady who had the baby's Jesus guns on the side of her truck was saying, that like the politicians who are trying to push for these laws, one, are doing so performatively. They want attention. They don't actually care about human lives.
Yeah.
And it is very evident that, one, they do not care about human lives, but two, they're doing this as a performance. They're doing this to get attention, to get votes. And they are radicalized in a way that a lot of people don't seem to recognize,
Mhm.
in the sense that lots of people feel like it's not going to be that crazy. Like they're not going to shoot people. Forget, like you don't know that.
Yeah.
So if the penalties for these laws gets really intense, you really have to watch how your data is shared and how you are sharing your information with the people you care about. So if you're building a network of people, you need to make sure that you're using services that do not share your information out with other people. And a meme that I saw on Facebook is what I'm originally talking about, is that it could be dangerous to track your period on your phone, because of the fact that data sharing takes place. There's lots of apps that are not protected by HIPAA regulations. They're not doctors. They're apps that sell your data to companies, government officials, etc., putting you at risk for, if abortion does become illegal at the rate that it kind of seems like it's heading that way, that your life could be in danger, in addition to it already be in danger just for not having access to safe medical care. So I found this, one, very upsetting, just because that's crazy and that they shouldn't be able to do this, but also as my head is a void, like I don't know how to keep track of these things otherwise. This is very upsetting because I was like, I don't know what to do. The convenience of technology also has a very big kind of like caveat, in that a lot of the data that you have on your phone is not safe. A lot of the data that you have in the digital space is not safe. And this extends into period tracking apps, as well as like mental health apps, honestly, as well, like Better Health, I believe. I maybe cut that out because I'm not exactly sure which one, but there are those like really cheap, easy mental health services that do sell data. So it all kind of ties back to that. But at first I was like, wow, that's really crazy. But then I did research on it, and it's not, because the government, and specifically ICE, is already doing this level of data collection on tracking to find immigrants. They're using social media. They're buying data from large companies in order to track people. And they already have a database established with all of this information. So this could literally be bought and utilized by our government if they felt like using it in a more authoritarian, fascist way, which it likely could. So an alternative that I found on a website, Period Tracking Privacy on the Washington Post, it offers kind of like alternatives to tracking digitally, which weren't super helpful, because it was literally just like, write them down instead. Use pen and paper, have a safe person who will remember with you, which is like my current method, because you need to know this information in order to track and be able to meet the windows that, if you were in a position where you need an abortion, you need to know your cycle so that you can track how many weeks it's been, because that's how a lot of these bans and restrictions are organized. So it all kind of ties back to oppressive forces, but a lot of the recommendations were to write these things down manually, store them in a spreadsheet, which also I feel like is suspect if it's on your computer. Have a safe person. That's something that you can do. But another piece of what I wanted my section to be is kind of just focusing on the issues across the board that the film covers. So this film specifically covered two very large categories of things that humans experience. But in this specific instance, the issues of like sexual assault and abortion. So the first film covers abortion, the second one covers sexual assault, and we see these themes overlap. So I kind of pulled all of my resources with these two themes in mind. And there's some overlap with the resources because I try to get as specific as possible, as well as there's just a lot of information. I've edited as best as I could. So please give me feedback on if there are resources not mentioned that you want to be added to this list, or if you find any list of resources that, like, one, weren't helpful for you, or you had an overt problem with them. I vetted them as best as I could, but this is the first time creating a list of this scale. So I will definitely update it as is necessary or as is told to me, as well as I continue to kind of build these, because we're going to try to do this for every episode in the series. I prepared resources like generally for dealing with issues of sexual assault on campuses. There's organizations like victimsrights.org, Take Back the Night, Know Your IX, NWLC, RAIN, etc., that offer services in dealing with sexual assault, general violence, and how to report those things, as well as seek legal and professional support. And those lists will be listed there. I also outlined specific resources that are pointed towards LGBTQIA individuals dealing with this, as well as BIPOC people who are dealing with this, because intersectionality, you need to have resources that are specifically made for you, because not everyone fits this box. There's also a resource on the hotline.org where you can create a safety plan for dealing with these things and making sure that, like, you have a plan in place for, God forbid, if this happens to you. And they offer like a way to kind of prepare yourself. It sucks that we even have to do that, but it does exist as a resource. I also found out that RAIN, which is very popular as like an organization that supports people who've experienced sexual assault, has some problematic potential backstory about not being intersectional, about having like racism and sexism within their workspace. So I did share an article on that within there, just as an FYI.
It's good to have the information.
Yeah, it's hard because it's like they are an organization that does fund like hotlines, services, a lot of other things like that. But I want you to kind of have the full picture on, like, sometimes these organizations aren't perfect and might end up doing more harm than good. So I also outlined resources for abortion access. There's lots of things on Planned Parenthood that you can access, like action. You can find rallies, protests, stuff like that in your area. You can see a state-by-state tracker for what your current state has in terms of abortion access and restrictions. And like organizations and your like state legislators, it gives you that like context on how you can kind of reach out to them specifically and be like, hey, if you want to keep office, you better get this together. And there's a state-by-state tracker on there. It says that it hasn't been updated since September 1st, 2021. So I've provided 3 other links that provide a similar state-by-state tracker option, because the fact that so much of this is happening right now, 2021 is too long ago to rely on that information. So if that's potentially just like not an act, like they just haven't updated that specific sentence, that's possible. But I offered, there's gutmatcher.org that seems to have a more accurate and up-to-date list, as well as abortionfunds.org state legislative updates. They seem possibly more accurate. At least they list 2022 in their titles. There's also a legislative tracker that you can follow on freedomforallamericans.org that outlines any kind of legislation that's in the works, specifically anti-trans legislation, attacks on women's rights, attacks on like any sort of like bans or restrictions on individuals. And you can track that to know what you need to be, like your talking points for contacting your representatives in the government. There's also lots of websites that I have listed that will give you petitions, protest opportunities, as well as just like connecting factors to other people who are trying to do the work and fight for equal access and civil rights and, you know, all these things that are under attack right now. I list some petitions that you can sign. I'm going to try to build that out a little bit more. There's also some places you can donate to. Specifically abortionsfunds.org. It's where I got a lot of this information. They also list out so many organizations that offer funding for people who are in need of transportation, legal services, and abortion. So there's many places you can donate there. Planned Parenthood, of course, you can donate to help them, one, update that list, but also
Yeah.
give them more access to resources so that they can keep their clinics open as a support for not even just abortions, but
Just
prenatal care,
life.
just like medical care in general,
They were my
preventing
primary
cancer.
medical person for years.
Yeah, like just medical care in general that is available and safe. So highly recommend donating to them. You can also donate to them in someone else's name, and then they send a letter, and that's just a fun little to just make you feel a little happy with pettiness,
Mhm.
and you're doing a good thing. I also just like provide some general contextual information and articles that I read that kind of just outline the ways in which that this extends as like a human rights issue, in addition to just like it's not just about abortions. Like it
Mhm.
is very much about that, but there's so many other things that'll be impacted by this, including miscarriages, who they act like in medical terms they still call those abortions, so like you're not
Mhm.
saying um and there's lots of things in terms of ectopic pregnancies. The
Yeah.
lawmakers that are in place don't know women's bodies, like they
Nope.
don't understand.
They don't know what ectopic pregnancies are,
Yeah, they don't know that that's not a pregnancy and you will die.
and there will be no baby.
Yeah. So there's lots of things that you can be doing, and I have this firmly outlined in that very long listicle, and I'll keep adding to it over time. And hopefully, with each episode of this series, you'll have even more resources and calls to action for things you can actually do to channel the rage and just like frustration and sadness and other emotions into something that feels
Like you're making a
substantial
difference.
enough. Yeah. That makes you feel slightly less like, I just want to stare at a wall until the world ends.
Mhm.
Um, it gives you kind of like very feasible and actionable things that you can do to make yourself even just feel slightly better for 2 seconds.
It's so important.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Well, yes. Thank you, Kat. Thank you for all
yeah.
those resources. And it's like a lot of those things are horrifying. They're always adapting and changing. They're I can also like if you're someone who even just wants to like read and learn more about those things or like fictional things. There are things I've read like When She Wrote Woke by Hillary Jordan. It's about a
Hmm.
woman who has an abortion, but she's labeled like a murderer.
Hmm.
It's like dystopian, things like that. I can always recommend those as well.
Yeah.
Like if you're someone who'd like will internalize the information a bit better. This series is going to be really important to not only just highlighting like what these films are doing and whether or not they're doing a good job, but also like what we can do because that's super important. Like we always want to make sure that we're not only making you sad about the situations, but also like giving you next steps so that you can try to change the world
Yeah.
and contribute in any way that you can. What that means, like donating to those funds, even if you don't ever have an intention of having an abortion. Um,
Yeah.
it's people's choice, and they should be supported.
Yeah.
And you can never ban abortions; you
You
just
just
ban
ban
safe
safe
ones.
ones.
So
Yeah.
here's hoping.
Yeah, I mean, so I wanted it very much to just not be like a sad trauma dump where it's like everything's awful because it is, and I didn't want to just yell about it. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, but sometimes that's okay.
yeah, yeah, and I think we do that a lot of the time.
Yeah. And we'll have fun again at
Yeah,
some point, but we're going to use this platform to speak up, especially about issues that are happening right now. This is very important. And we want to make sure you feel supported and that you know how to support. And so, yeah, um, don't get married.
they'll eat your kids.
Hmm.